Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing Game 74 of the regular season between the San Jose Sharks and the Winnipeg Jets, in which the Sharks have won 3-0. So the Sharks have really not been doing a lot of winning lately. They came into tonight's game on a 9-game losing streak and also having lost 14 of their last 15 games. And you may be wondering, well, what team did they get that one win against over those last 15? It was actually the Winnipeg Jets. And so they come here once again against Winnipeg and once again managed to take it to them. And what's pretty crazy is that the Jets really aren't that bad of a team. It's not as though they're also with the San Jose Sharks in the complete basement of the league. In fact, it's very possible that by the end of this season, the Jets will be in the playoffs. They currently are in a playoff position, leading either the Flames / the Nashville Predators by a couple of points. It's just that for whatever reason, the Sharks seem to play decent enough against the Winnipeg Jets, but more particularly, it is James Reimer who seems to absolutely step it up versus this team. That last win back at the beginning of March was James Reimer holding off the Winnipeg Jets for enough time that the Sharks managed to tie the game up at 2 with the last 10 seconds of the third period and then winning it in overtime. Here tonight, he was even better, not giving the Jets even a single goal when the Sharks get this shutout. And it was kind of a situation of James Reimer tonight, the classic cliche of you have to be lucky to be good and you have to be good to be lucky, because while there were a lot of very, very nice saves by James Reimer, he also definitely had a lot of bounces go his way. The big one was certainly near the end of that second period. That great chance, I believe it was from Mason Appleton on the Jets side. He takes that shot completely wide open net. Reimer just sort of sticks his stick out hoping for the best, and it actually ends up hitting his stick and making the save, which is, in my opinion, pretty lucky in that situation. You'll see most goaltenders try and just stick out their stick as a last chance desperation attempt, and most of the time it doesn't work, but here in this particular case it did. And so that was a massive save, and he made so many other ones in tonight's game to get the Sharks this 3-0 win. Now, generally in terms of actual play on the ice, this wasn't a complete stolen game from James Reimer. Obviously, I would say the ice was tilted in favor of the Winnipeg Jets here tonight, but not so much that it felt as though it was completely overwhelming for San Jose, especially in the first, 30 minutes of this game. I thought the Sharks played it relatively close to the Jets and would score the first goal of this game, of course, since the Jets had 0, about halfway through the first period with a Noah Gregor one just as a power play would expire to make it 1-0 San Jose, and that 1-0 lead would actually stand until the end of the second period, so 40 minutes through, and the Sharks had a precarious 1-goal advantage. But in the third period, they would manage to extend that lead to 2 with a goal from Kevin Labanc, and while the Jets would get a ton of chances for themselves, including shorthanded chances on a power play that the Sharks would get with the remaining 3.5 minutes of the third period, but eventually it would be Martin Kaut on a wide open net being able to take this power play goal to give the Sharks the 3-0 lead and the 3-0 win. Moving on to the standings here, you'll notice first of all, they're now only down to 4 teams instead of the usual 5. Originally, when I started the tracking of the bottom of the standings, I had a 5th team in there because at the time that 5th team was Arizona, and they were only a couple of points out of the bottom 4 picture, so it felt relevant to keep them there. At this point, the 5th last team in the league has 66 points, being the Montreal Canadiens, and the likelihood of the Ducks actually winning 5 games and dropping out of this bottom 4, or sort of jumping out of this bottom 4, I guess you could say, is pretty much 0. There's absolutely 0 chance of that happening. And so really, we are locked into this bottom 4. But with this San Jose Sharks victory, they go from last place in the league all the way to 3rd last place in the league. And this is a massive drop in terms of their draft lottery chances. At that first place position, or that last place position, they have a 25.5% chance of getting the first overall pick. Now in 3rd last, they have only an 11.5% chance, meaning those odds were cut in half and then even more than that. So this is a a nice feel-good win for the Sharks players, but in terms of the Sharks management and future, this is a really tough one, because if you look at the teams around them, there were the two Jackets wins that they did get in overtime somewhat recently that kind of brought them back into a very tight draft lottery race here. But both the Blue Jackets and the Ducks have just been racking up losses at this point. They have stood pat at their current point totals for a very, very long time. And so this one win by San Jose leapfrogs two teams and puts them in a situation where, like I said, their draft lottery odds of winning are significantly worse. This is honestly a much more interesting race than the ongoing playoff races, which are taking place between maybe a couple of teams, but this is incredibly close. And the fact is that the Sharks, they do find themselves in that third last spot, and it's very possible that over the last 8 games in the case of the Ducks and the Blackhawks, and the 9 games in case of the Blue Jackets, it's very possible that these teams don't win any of them. The Sharks are going to need help in this situation if they want to be able to find themselves in last place, but it's very possible that the Blackhawks could end this season with another 8 straight losses and just have 54 points. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's not out of the question. And so the San Jose Sharks, like I said, it was a nice win to get, but did they just torpedo their opportunity of getting that last place spot in the best possible odds at Connor Bedard? They very well might have, but there is still 8/9 games left, so we shall see. On to the players to talk about. We had yet another injury for the San Jose Sharks here going into tonight's game, and that was Alexander Barabanov, out day to day. We don't know when he's going to be back, but the Sharks having to adjust again, another call-up, this one being Jeff Viel from the Barracuda, and on the first line now, it was Couture joined by Agazino and Fabian Zetterlund, and this ended up making up probably the worst line for the San Jose Sharks here tonight. It was just not good at all. Agazino, who had been very impressive on the Western Canada road trip through Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver, looked quite bad here tonight. Logan Couture just looked completely out of it as well. There was zero chemistry with Zetterlund. On top of that, Zetterlund not good, hasn't really been good ever since he joined the San Jose Sharks, and just generally this was definitely their worst performing line here tonight, pretty much always in that defensive zone, not really getting any chances for themselves. When it came to the second line, I actually was a decent fan of this trio, Hertl, Martin Kaut, and Jacob Peterson. Peterson, I had pointed out, had a pretty good game in the previous one against the Calgary Flames. Here tonight, I thought he stepped it up even further, had an actually really solid performance here tonight, especially in the earlier parts of the game. I felt as though not as apparent as it went on, especially since the Jets kind of just took control a bit of the game as we moved to the latter parts. But early on, for sure, Pettersson stood out in a positive light and had a very nice assist on the Noah Gregor goal that made it 1-0. Hertl, I also thought, had a pretty good night. This time around, I thought it was Martin Kaut who was probably the weak link on this trio, but again, it goes in the same exact situation I talked about in that game against the Calgary Flames, where just because there is a weak link on the line doesn't mean that that weak link actually played all that bad. I thought Kaut was pretty decent, just kind of paled in comparison to the other two. When it comes to the third line, Gregor, Sturm, and LeBanc, a bit of an interesting look, to say the least there. LeBanc on that third line with Sturm and Gregor, and I thought this third line actually looked rather good. The real standout performer here tonight, I thought, was Noah Gregor on that third line. Very solid performance for himself. Not only does he get a goal on that one, but also an assist in taking part in the third line goal scored by Kevin LeBanc on the deflection from the Nico Sturm shot. So definitely a solid game for the third line, but it was the fourth line that I thought really started this one off extremely well. Jeff Viel, in his 2 previous seasons with the San Jose Sharks, he has played some games, but he's always been much more known as a sort of enforcer and not really at all as any sort of offensive contribution. But ever since he's been in the Barracuda for the pretty much entirety of this season, besides this current game, he's actually been contributing offensively, at least somewhat, with the Barracuda. I'm not saying he's near the tops of the tables there, but he has been getting goals, he has been getting points, and so he earns the call up here, and I thought he actually had a couple of nice plays, also more tilted towards the earlier parts of this game, but he got a nice breakaway that ended up drawing a penalty. He made a nice play on an even earlier part in this game, which set up a great chance, I believe, for Lindblom. And just generally, it was an effective game for the fourth line as a whole. When it comes to the defensive side of things, we have the top pairing of Vlasic and Erik Karlsson. And I must say, we likely witnessed the worst ever shift from a defenseman in their defensive zone that didn't end up leading to a goal against in the history of the San Jose Sharks, in the history of the NHL. Erik Karlsson, an absolutely horrid performance on that one particular shift to go with a pretty bad game in general. This shift came in the latter part of the second period, about 3 minutes to go. This is the exact shift where James Reimer had to make that miraculous stick save. Erik Karlsson gave the puck away / lost control of the puck 4 times in the span of 30 seconds that led to multiple grade A Winnipeg Jets opportunities. It was difficult to watch each and every single one of these mishandles of the puck. It's absolutely absurd. I could tell you that if that was like a rookie player making those types of mistakes, they would be put into a cannon and shot into the sun at the intermission by David Quinn. Of course, you're not going to take Karlsson off. You're not going to make him miss shifts. You're not going to just bench him for the rest of the game because he is Erik Karlsson. But again, if he was an inexperienced player, he would be gone faster than you could even say San Jose Sharks. So definitely an awful shift for Erik Karlsson. Probably one of his worst games of the season. Didn't even do all that much offensively, though he did end up with a secondary assist on the Martin Kaut goal to help him on the road to 100, but in the end, not so good. On the other side of things, some of the other Sharks defensemen actually had pretty decent games. I'm actually looking at Mario Ferraro, who has usually been quite bad for the San Jose Sharks. I usually don't have much good things to actually say about him, but honestly, I thought he was pretty decent here tonight. The same would actually go for Jacob McDonald. A couple of small issues, a couple of aggressive pinches that ended up maybe not working super well, but I thought he was otherwise rather decent defensively. And then, of course, we have the goaltender. I already went on the whole spiel with James Reimer earlier on in this video, talking about how insane he was here tonight, the major reason why the Sharks managed to actually get this victory. So there's not really any more to say there. Just an really standout performance and otherwise extremely miserable season for him. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Thursday, where they will take on the Vegas Golden Knights. So while the Jets are a playoff team that the Sharks seem to have the number of, the Vegas Golden Knights are also a playoff team near the top of the Pacific Division, and as we know, the Jets have the Sharks number, at least they do historically, so the Sharks may very well get right back into the lose column. Class dismissed.